a foster carer for 25 years this year. Sophia first came to live with us when she was 3. She was 3 years old, and she stayed with us in the beginning about 9-10 months, and then they identified an adoptive placement for Sophia, and she went off to this adoptive placement, and she was there for about a year, but unfortunately the adoption didn't go through. They saw different behaviour to what I saw. She was aggressive towards them, she used to kick them, she used to bite them. I don't know what it was. And so they took the decision to put her back into care. And then at that point, I received a lovely letter from her social worker asking me if we could find it in our hearts to take Sophia back. You always knew Sophia was about. She let herself, and she was there. At school, although I think she enjoyed school, because we always thought there was something about her that wasn't quite right. And so by the time she was 8, 9, we looked into it, and she was diagnosed with ADHD, and she was on the autistic spectrum. So they got her a one-to-one at school, because she found it hard to sit and concentrate. She used to float off from her desk, and even at high school she was quite prone to wander off and not concentrate. I know through that primary school and high school she had medications, different medications. My thoughts on ADHD are they're quite active, put themselves in dangerous situations, they jump about all the time. I mean, hers were a bit different to that.
When you hear the word autistic or ADHD, you think ADHD, bouncing off the walls. You think autism, special needs, or like Rain Man, super intelligent, but sometimes it's not the case. Mostly children with autism struggle with 4 key areas of difference. So social, communication, emotional and sensory. So children with autism, their normal day-to-day life is quite difficult because they can't kind of compute what's going on. They might not understand certain situations. They won't understand certain conversations. Things like irony, sarcasm can completely over their heads. Children with ADHD, or people with ADHD, again, they come up with similarities in their differences, such as communication and social situations, but theirs is more triggered from behaviour. So their behaviour could be labelled as naughty or not listening, but actually they can't, because they've got so much energy going on in their bodies, they can't actually stop to listen and zone into what you're having a conversation about.
When we went to Blackpool, it was our last family holiday, and she dragged me on Pepsi Max. I hate that roller coaster. You sit there and it tells you how fast it's going, and I'm like, I don't want to be there, I want to get out. And she's keeping me old. And she made me go right to the end, so if I had to get out, I had to climb over, and she won't let me climb over. But as last family holiday, we all went on Blackpool. It might not have been fancy, but it was the last thing that we've all got a big photo, and we're all smiling in it, and that's just all that counts. And we're all happy, and we all talked before it all went to shit.
The first point where we thought there was something going wrong was some girls that she knew moved onto this street, just in the flats there, and there were friends from school that she knew. So she started visiting their flat, and then at the same point, this young man further up the street was visiting that flat. She was 18 when she first met this young man. Well, I'm saying young man, he was 31. He ended up becoming her boyfriend. Sophie spent more and more time over at this flat, and it got to the point that she was staying out all week, not going to college. And then she was coming back on a Friday and knocking on the door and asking for a bank card. But we kept telling her over and over again, is this person's using you for your money. You get your income support on a Friday. He's taking that income support off you, and it's his drug money for weekend, or it's his beer money, or his cigarette money for weekend.
Apart from social services, I had a PA. So it's just like a social worker, but not as strict. So they let off a loose a bit, and they helped me find my own place. I moved into my own house. They got me back into college. They just kept me basically. They were like helping me. Like when I moved out, instead of having someone there all the time, they'd be there, but they won't be there, if you understand. So I was rebellion from them, but then they didn't try and help me to get out of that way. I had to do it myself, and it was like kind of crap.
Gipsel, which is a part of the housing on Gipton, they find properties for young people, and they're like flats. They're like they seem to watch over them to make sure that they're paying the bills and they're doing. And these flats are like trainer flats. They put them in these flats to see if they can cope and look after themselves. And she had one of those on Gipton, which we've always said they put in these not very nice areas, mixing with other people in the same situation, instead of putting them somewhere away from that situation in a nicer area. They just don't seem to work like that. And social services visit you while they're living at your house. They inspect your properties and everything to make sure everything's fine. And then when they get to 18, it's like they plonk them there in a little flat in an undesirable area with undesirable people, and expect them to get on with life. The support from ordinary social workers throughout her growing up, they all were, I must say, fantastic. It was just this last part where she had this worker from this team, the over 18s. She had an appointment one morning with him at 10 o'clock, and she came in and she sat down, and she was absolutely filthy. She hadn't had a wash, her hair were all over the place, and so we ended up with a full black bag of washing that she hadn't done. And he said, I think Sophie should go get changed. I think they were going to meet somebody from the housing. And I said, well, really, Sophia can't get changed? And he said, well, why is that, Sophia? I said, and I plonked the black bag in front of him, with a bag full of washing. I said, all the clothes are in that bag, dirty. And he said, oh, Sophia, what we're going to do with you? Time after time after time, I mentioned it on more than one occasion, that if Sophia left my house, that something bad would happen to her.
We all tried to help her, but I think it was more like she needed the social services to help her a lot more than us, because we'd only see her when she was coming up to see and go to that house, and then social workers did all the rest, because she moved. We didn't know where she was going or where she was sleeping. She didn't talk to us. And then we'd see her living, I'd see her on the street walking up to their house, and they'd argue, and it was just horrible. Like, Lorraine and Sophia used to be close, but when Sophia decided to be her and do what she wanted, Ellen and Lorraine were arguing all the time.
On the Saturday morning, a paramedic car came flying up the street, and it parked upon the grass outside that flat. And the paramedics went in, and they were in there for ages. And then an ordinary ambulance came up the street and parked up. And I kept looking out the bedroom window thinking, you know, oh, what's he done? You know, what's happened? Never thinking that Sophia were there. And then after a long time, they brought somebody out on a trolley and put him in the back of the ambulance. And the paramedic out the paramedic car went off in the ambulance as well and left the car. And I thought, oh, it must be serious because the paramedic's gone, you know, in the ambulance. There were only 2 people in that flat that night. There was Sophia and this ex-boyfriend. And we knew the ex-boyfriend took drugs, but we'd have thought for 1 minute that Sophia were taking drugs. We didn't have any idea. And so they took her to hospital. So that was the Saturday at about 11 o'clock, I think, the ambulance were called. And she passed away at 10:30 that evening.
When my sister passed away, I went on a line of down drinking drugs because I had nobody. It's what you feel like when you're in care. You just get plonked in a family, and it is nice because obviously they do care about you and they do think of you and stuff like that, but it's just not the same. It's not your family. You just don't feel like you fit in. Even though they make you fit in, you just generally deep down and you just don't feel like you fit in. So when she died, I had nobody to talk to. And I just went off the rails.
You know, from my experience, a child that has specific learning needs and then has are in the care system, especially those who have not found their forever home, the gap is so big because, again, in my experience, on top of having autism, for example, we've then got the issue of attachment. And then we've got the issue of, because of the autism, it's hard to build attachments anyway, but when you've built the attachment, then it could be taken away from you. And it's kind of that constant anxiety, I think, and having them outburst because of the anxiety that it's causing. It's my own bugbear now. I think in society we need to do more for this and more for people and children with needs, and then people and children with needs in care.
The police contacted me to ask if I would go identify Sophia at the hospital on the Thursday morning. They would send somebody to pick me up and bring me back. So by the Thursday, there was only one person that had contacted me from social services, and that were my supervising social worker. I don't know who social services thought were dealing with it, because Sophia had left mine a year previous. Social services had looked after Sophia since she was 6 months old. She went into care when she was 6 months old. And social services have looked after her right up to this point. Oh, I'm saying looked after her. In last couple of years, they hadn't really. And they're just going to shove her off out the back door, so to speak.
I think if they helped to get away from the person that she was with, then none of that would have happened. She wouldn't have. She was easily manipulated, but if you got there before, like she got manipulated, there would have been a chance that they developed her and she'd have got my dad right back.
Yeah, I think Sophia, when she took the wrong path. I mean, she was always vulnerable, and that was my worry, that if she left here before we thought she was ready to leave, that that something bad was going to happen to her, and it did.